So, hello everyone. This is a webinar series part of the FireAdapt project. It's the third webinar of this series that runs every last Wednesday of every month. For those that are interested in knowing more about FireAdapt, you can visit the FireAdapt website, which is fireadapt.eu. And also there is the February webinar, which was the first one that we did, where Ima Oliveras, our scientific coordinator, gave a brief overview of the project. So if somebody's interested, please check that one webinar. We are not many people today, but some housekeeping rules. As always, please mute your microphones and we can have a Q&A session at the end. You can post questions on the chat or you can raise your hand to speak and discuss with Gian Luca. So after this, I'll introduce Gian Luca Spadoni. He's an environmental engineer from the University La Sapienza, University of Rome, and did his PhD in forest ecology at the University of Turin with a one-year visit period at IRD in France. He was supervised by Davide Ascoli and Ima Oliveras and defended his thesis last year on geospatial modeling of fire regimes in Mediterranean and tropical socio-ecological systems. Gianluca is currently a postdoc at the University of Turin and affiliated researcher at UMR AMAP group as well. So before I give you the floor, just a reminder that the webinar is being recorded, so it will be available later on the FireAdapt webpage. So with all that said, please, Gianluca, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Nuria. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, so I'm going to share my screen. I hope you can see it, right? You can see it?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, perfect. So thank you. Today I'm going to present this study about modeling carbon balance trajectories under contrasting scenarios of rewilding and fire management. It's 5 chapters, so it's not that long. I hope you can hold on until the final chapter. So to give a little introduction, we all are aware that there's a growing scientific and policy interest in rewilding, especially in Europe, where land abandonment is advancing, and that presents a really useful context for the application of rewilding strategies. Rewilding is supposed to, even though its effects are still matter of debate, is supposed to improve, enhance biodiversity and other ecosystem services, including carbon sequestration. Okay, just to precise, in this study we were referring to passive rewilding, so not the rewilding that involves the introduction of fauna of animals, but it's just a form of passive management that leads ecosystems to intentionally to develop with minimal or no human intervention. Okay. Rewilding, however, might also, as it is like just letting vegetation grow and according to its own dynamics, might also increase the fuel load and connectivity, increasing the risk of wildfires. Okay, especially in a climate change scenario. And this might lead to increased carbon emissions that might compromise the carbon balance and the carbon that is stocked into vegetation, leading to eventually to a negative carbon balance. Okay. So the core research question in this study was actually, we were asking ourselves if there's a way to implement rewilding accounting for fire hazard to optimize long-term carbon balance. And our hypothesis our main hypothesis was that yes, we can somehow, by combining on one side the location of rewilding. So we can reason better, we can locate these rewilding strategies accounting for fire risk in what we call in the study fire smart rewilding. And on the other hand, by integrating these rewilding strategies with enhanced fire management strategies, coupling not only suppression but also fire prevention with the rewilding strategy. Okay, so this is the methodology we applied. We used landscape modeling approach, and in particular, we used remains that was developed originally by Adrian. Adrian Regos, that I've seen is online. Adrian is the godfather of remains, which is this very cool landscape model that can simulate interactions among the processes that you see in the figure to the left, to the right-hand side. So fire spread, land use changes, vegetation dynamics, and the interactions from all these processes then can lead us to account to assess the carbon balance. We calibrated remains using real data, including field collected data on carbon stock. And of course, to answer our hypothesis, we simulated these interactions under different scenarios of fire management and rewilding that I'm going to present later. Also, we were interested in simulating long-term carbon balance trajectories. And so we simulated future interactions over a period of 14 years, starting from 2018. And we simulated dynamics over 4 different landscapes, and also accounting for stochasticity related to these processes. So we ran, just to say that we ran approximately 20,000 simulations, okay, just to show off a bit. These are the landscapes that we simulated. So we were interested in the Italian Alpine region because it is increasingly exposed to wildfires, but also to land abandonment that, as I said before, can then present an optimal scenario for the implementation of rewilding strategies. We simulated 4 landscapes that goes from east to west, covering a flammability gradient. So this flammability gradient, and of course, yeah, inversely correlated to the humidity and other social ecological conditions. This is just to explain you briefly how remains work. Remains were, as I said, was originally developed by Adrian and his group, but we did several editings to the model. Remains is a specially explicit model that can simulate land cover changes, vegetation dynamics, and fire spread over annual time steps and over a grid of 30 over 30 meters pixels. So land cover changes were simulated starting from Korean land cover transitions. We observed past Korean land cover transitions over our landscapes to produce a land cover change matrix that was representing future land cover transitions. Also, an important thing about the vegetation dynamics simulated in remains is that as vegetation was aging, the age of the vegetation was correlated with increasing carbon stock on one hand, but also increasing flammability. And that is an important factor because from here you can already perceive that some trade-offs are rising, no? With flammability and carbon stock both increasing with the age of flammability. And also fire spread. So we had a national data, so we use a national data set to calibrate the fires, and that we also we enhanced this burnt area projections in the future using according to climate change. Okay, to simulate climate change, we increased a bit the mean values and also the variability of the total burnt area in our simulation period. From all these processes interacting, we had from remains these output variables. So for each pixel, we had a land cover type, an age, and we knew if it burned or not over the simulation period. And from these output variables, we could assess then the carbon balance that we calculated as the delta carbon stock, so the difference in carbon stock between the last year of the simulation and the first year. And then we also further subtracted the emissions from fires, for all the fires that happened, that occurred during our simulation period, okay? Just to be a little bit more precise about that, so I just wanted to stress that, yes, as you can see in the graph, the flammability of all the land cover types was increasing with the age, but the flammability of broadleaf that was decreasing just for the last age class. Yeah. And so after a while, the flammability of broadleafs was decreasing, as it's supposed to be according to literature and to our data. And also another thing I wanted to stress is how we assess the carbon stock. We collected the carbon stock in our 4 different landscapes across different sites, different replicates, and we could calibrate some linear models, linear equations representing the evolution of carbon stock with the age of the land cover types. Okay, so this, for instance, is a carbon stock equation that we calibrated for the landscape of Piedmont and for the land cover of conifer forests. Also, just to explain in a few words more how the fire spread worked. So the fire spread is simulated in a very sophisticated way. It works within ignitions that are located based on a fire hazard layer. There's then an annual burnt area target that is sampled from the burnt area series from our national datasets of input. And then fire spread according to an approach that is called like neighbor approach. So each cell surrounding the cell that already burned is candidate to burn or not, is a probability of burning for each cell is assessed. And then if a certain threshold is passed, then the fire front can go on also this candidate cell. If it doesn't go on the candidate cell, then that cell is accounted as suppressed. So there's a suppression mechanisms also simulated in remains. And the last thing I want to say about fires is that where cells that are burned, they are brought their age goes back of one age class. And it is called fire rejuvenation effect. Okay, so also based on the fires that happen in our landscapes and based on field collected data, we could then calibrate equations of carbon emissions as we did for the carbon stock. And then from carbon stock and carbon emission, we could assess the carbon balance. The management scenarios that we introduced in remains to address our hypotheses and research questions were the following. We simulated 3 different types of strategies. The first one is landscape management strategies. So simply across all our landscapes, we set that 40% of the forest, 20% of the pasture, and 100% of the crops were managed, where for us landscape management means that the aging process was stopped. So the land cover types were not aging, their flammability was remaining so constant and to low levels, we can assume. And also flammability, it was remaining to a low level, but also far to reduce by 30% in the managed landscapes. Then other strategies that we implemented is rewilding strategies. So we conversely, rewilding was modeled, we can say it was a sort of the opposite of landscape management because it was allowing the aging of all the land cover types. And we also assumed that flammability under rewilding was increasing for the first 20 years of the simulation and then decreasing for the last 20 years. This is kind of a strong assumption, but we assume that rewilding was established in landscape of high natural value. That's why then we did this hypothesis, this assumption. And also we set rewilding across the landscapes for a total amount of 10% of the landscapes according to the EU biodiversity strategy. That doesn't refer directly to rewilding, it refers to strictly protected areas, but somehow also referring to rewilding strategies that can take place in these strictly protected areas. We simulated 2 different types of rewilding. You can see in this little, very simple kind of rupestral figure. Strict rewilding was placed, as you can see in the blue polygon, was placed with a priority within the protected areas and without accounting for flammability or fire-prone areas, while smart rewilding was placed giving priority to low flammability areas and also without creating conflicts with managed areas. And of course, this was at the price we had to pay for that is that fire smart rewilding was not placed entirely within the protected areas, but could also be placed outside protected areas in what we called latent reserves that is a portions of landscape that is not managed and is outside protected area, so without a direct functionality. So we assume they can really represent a resource for the place, for the location of fire smart rewilding. Fire management strategies is the last kind of strategy that we simulated. In particular, we simulated two fire management strategies. The first one is increased suppression. So we relied on suppression mechanisms already implemented in remains, and we increased the suppression potential by 33%. And the other one was prevention. So we simulated fire prevention with two complementary mechanisms. The first was direct prevention. So we established fire breaks in our landscapes, and with the hypothesis that they had null flammability, and they were covering approximately 2% of the entire landscapes. They were also placed along the viability of the landscapes, so along the roads, also the forest roads. And we also introduced indirect prevention. So we expanded of a 2% the already existing agromosaic. So we introduced more crops, okay, in our landscapes. And then these are the scenarios that we simulated. The scenarios are combinations of the strategies that I just presented, okay? So these are the four different scenarios, but actually then we simulated a different scenario because each one of these scenarios was simulated with strict rewilding and fire smart rewilding. So if you see the last row, there's these boxes that, yes, they're in the same row because it means that we simulated the scenarios both for strict and fire smart rewilding. But anyway, so here you can see that the business as usual scenario was not including any fire management strategy. So you see that the boxes are not colored, they're not in a dark color because they were not fire smart strategies. And while in the suppression scenario, there was just the option that was turned on of suppression, increased suppression, while in the prevention scenario, there was just mechanisms of prevention that were simulated. And then the last scenario was called integrated fire management. That was just the combination of suppression and prevention. So you see that both the cells are colored. And as I said before, rewilding, each scenario was simulated both for strict and fire smart rewilding, and landscape management was kept constant across the different scenarios, okay? Then, looking at the scenarios, here we can find our hypothesis, because we can find that going from left to right across scenarios, we can see that our first hypothesis was that fire management, so across scenarios, increases carbon balance, yes, going from left to right, with the assumption that suppression is necessary to optimize carbon balance in a climate change scenarios and accounting for rewilding, but it's not sufficient. And so our hypothesis is that including both integrating suppression and prevention lead to the best results. And also the second hypothesis was that across the different scenarios representing different fire management options, fire smart rewilding was enhancing carbon balance across all these scenarios compared to strict rewilding. So some results. These are some results related to the four different landscapes that you saw in the map. But today I'm going to just focus on one landscape, on the landscape of Piedmont, that probably you're going to see if you're going to go to the study hub. I mean, you're gonna see at least what's the area and the ecoregion, let's say. I'm not sure if you're going to go exactly in that landscape, but anyway, I'm going to present some results related to that. So let's zoom in a little bit. And what you can see from this series of box plots is that we can notice different things. So first, looking at the fire management strategies, so the different colors that are representing the box plots, we can see that actually fire management strategies, they actually reduce total burnt area going from left to right. So integrated fire management and fire management strategies that are different, that include strategies compared to the business as usual. They actually reduce the total burnt area. They have more potential for suppressed area, as you can see in the second row. And in the third row, you can see that they maintain older forests, older vegetation. Well, no, forest is just forest, I'm sorry. And also, you can see that the net carbon balance is actually increased, also going from business as usual to more sophisticated fire management strategies. Another result is that fire smart rewilding, so results related to the rewilding strategy. You can see that the darker colors that represent the fire smart rewilding are related to less total burnt area. You can see that in the first row. So the darkest color has less total burnt area. And that actually, conversely, you can see that fire smart rewilding does not always lead to a better net carbon balance. So you can see this in the last row, because you can see that, for instance, in the business as usual, actually fire smart rewilding, unexpectedly, it leads to decreased net carbon balance, but it increases it in the other fire management scenarios, so in suppression, prevention, and especially in integrated fire management. In fact, if we look at the integrated strategies, we can see that actually by far the best option that comes out from these simulations, from these scenarios, is that integrating fire smart rewilding with integrated fire management leads to the most reduced, the lowest total burnt area and the highest net carbon balance. Okay, these are just another couple of results that I wanted to show you, but I'm going to go quite fast on that, just to show you that fire breaks, when they are introduced in the scenarios, they have really a key role in suppressing fires. You can see this in the first plot, because you can see that fire break suppression is the one that represented in red, and that just occurs in the last 4 scenarios where there is direct fire prevention that is related to the fire breaks. So you can see that they have really a key role. They can suppress a lot of potential burnt area. And also from the temporal trends, you can appreciate that integrated fire management, that is the last blue line here, it avoids high peaks in burnt area, while business as usual, for instance, there is the scenario here in dark gray, it has a lot of peaks, and along with an higher average total burnt area. So just to discuss briefly these results, this is the last chapter. The first hypothesis about the fire management strategies, what we found from our results is that integrated fire management is the best strategies in terms of burnt area reduction across all scenarios, but it just enhances carbon balance just when it's integrated with fire smart rewilding. And conversely, the second hypothesis about the rewilding, fire smart rewilding always reduces fire total burnt area across all the scenarios, but increases carbon balance only when it's integrated with fire management strategies, and especially integrated fire management. So we can assume from these conclusions that the best integrated strategy, as I was mentioning before, is so coupling both of these mechanisms, so fire smart rewilding and integrated fire management together. Some limitations from the study. Of course, there are some limitations. The first is the strong assumption that I said we did on rewilding effects on flammability. So we can find probably a better way to simulate rewilding effects on flammability in future studies. Also, we just implemented rewilding over 10% of the landscapes, but we could increase this percentage to see what if other conflicts can, like more important conflicts, major conflicts can arise from a stronger implementation of rewilding. And last we can see another limitation was that we could do other simulations for longer period that could probably highlight better some long-term processes such as the vegetation aging and the different effects from fire management strategies. So just a take-home message I want to give from this presentation, from this study, is that actually in the complex puzzle of European landscapes, there is space to implement rewilding. Rewilding can be implemented in European cultural landscapes, but we should account when we do this, when we implement rewilding, we should also account for fire hazard, and we should so integrate rewilding with appropriate fire management strategies that can really allow us to enhance the also carbon balance objectives that are linked to rewilding strategies. So thank you very much. And yes, so we are really among friends. So if you have questions, or if you have suggestions or things, don't hesitate. I'm here for you. So I can just stop maybe presenting for a moment, and then we can come back on the slides if you need.
Thank you very much, Gianluca. This was a very, very nice piece of work that you did. So congratulations on this work. Um, Excellent. Are there any questions for Gianluca? I can start. I do have one. I was thinking, Gianluca, for the numbers you show on how the different treatments and the different strategies influence or not on carbon balance. Do you think there are relevant differences or significant differences between applying fire smart rewilding and integrated fire management strategies to the other ones? The carbon balance benefit are relevant enough to say we need to go towards these strategies? Is there significance there?
Surya, yes, thank you. Yeah, for sure. I didn't show maybe some, but I mean, all the differences, major differences in carbon balance are significant. So what I was showing um, on the box plots, there are significant differences, yes. And then I wanted to show another plot that I didn't show today, but there's like zooming in a little bit on the differences in carbon balance and difference that might seem minor in the plot that I was showing are really they can be really huge differences. Okay, we're talking about differences of hundreds of thousands of tons of carbon across the different strategies. So yes, it can really make the difference. And also, I don't know if you notice in the graph, but sometimes the carbon balance was negative. So if we are not careful, really, uh, we might get a carbon balance that is negative. So we basically we lose carbon to the atmosphere. While if we are careful and if we implement these integrated strategies between rewilding and fire management, we can not only enhance the carbon balance but ensure that it remains positive.
Yeah, thank you. I think these results are very powerful as well for communicating, no, and disseminating the importance of implementing these strategies. I'm sure we can do that in terms of fire adapt on communicating these key outputs, no, and for general population as well to let them understand the benefits of these strategies. Thank you.
Yes.
I do have another question. Not sure if somebody has a question, please raise your hand or text it in the chat. It's about, well, the model perhaps or the implementation, probably I see Adrian has left, but it is about the fire breaks and the types of fires that you expect. So fire breaks are efficient because you mentioned that the having fire breaks really meant a lot of difference in the results. But we know that fire breaks are efficient only for some kinds of fires. If you have a very intense wildfire that sends spotting fires ahead of the fire breaks makes nothing, no? And this is one of the key challenges that we have in Mediterranean regions and in many other places, no? So how does model understand well, or how does it this fire breaks would work if we have like more intense fires included in the analysis.
Yes, Nuria, thank you. That's very interesting. It's actually another maybe another limitation that we have that I could list put on the list, because I mean on one side, fire breaks in the model are so powerful because we place them looking at the historical fires. So we really place the fire breaks, even though they were just set over at 2% of the landscapes, they were placed strategically in order to intersect most of the historical fires, and so accordingly we assume that they were also placed in the most fire-prone areas, no? And so that's why they had such an important effect. But also there's a limitation that is that fire breaks, we assume that they had really a zero flammability. So every time that a fire was meeting a fire break, it was stopped. So that we didn't simulate this process that you were mentioning. So this, yeah, as I said, is sort of a limitation.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe that's an interesting exercise as well to see how with climate change and expected like increase on fire intensity as well, and going towards more extreme wildfire scenarios, no? How this could how it would change the results of the modeling. But yeah, just maybe a suggestion or something to test quickly in the future.
No, it's true. Yeah, as I said, we should simulate higher percentages of rewilding and also higher percentages of fire intensity and fire occurrence. We did that a bit because we included an effect of climate change in the fires that we were simulating. So we didn't just simulate fires with the characteristics that they had in the past, but we included some effects on the fire regimes due to climate change. So increased total burnt area and increased variability is also in extremes. But still, that limitation in the sort of limitation in the model that fire breaks they cannot be trespassed. Uh, that remains. Yeah.
Nice, thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Okay. So if there are no more questions, we would be closing the webinar here. Again, congratulating Gianluca for the presentation and the work you had shown us today. And a reminder that this webinar will be available on FireAdapt's webinar section, and that we hope to have the next webinar on last Wednesday of May. So, Gianluca, hope you will be there as well and hope to see you all soon. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Nuria. Thank you to you. And thank everybody for being here today.